Hi everyone, welcome to the September 2nd edition of the TimeformUS Forecast. I am David Aragona here with my usual co-host Craig Mulkowski, and we're changing things up a little bit this week. We've been doing a lot of handicapping of Saratoga lately, mostly for my schedule, since that's where I'm focused throughout the summer months, but we're going to make an exception this week and take a look at Del Mar on Saturday, which seems appropriate since the horse that many would consider to be the best in training right now, Flightline, is making his two-turn debut, going 1.25 miles in the Pacific Classic, that of course being his final prep for the expected goal of the Breeders' Cup Classic in early November. And Craig, I think the eyes of the racing world are going to be trained on race 10 at Del Mar this Saturday, because it's really going to be interesting to see how this horse handles the distance. And we're going to talk about it as part of this sequence, but Flightline is a horse that definitely will has the star power going for him on Saturday.
He does when he shows up. It's kind of interesting. We're in September now, and this will only be his second race of the year. So for me, he's kind of, he's only exciting when he actually shows up. He's not a horse I think very much of the rest of the time. And it's kind of odd for a guy that makes speed figures, because I don't believe I've ever seen a horse run the kind of figures he has in his first three starts. He started out with a 133 and has progressed to the upper 130s in his next two. So for me, he's a bit of an enigma. They said they hope to keep him around at 5, so maybe we'll see a little more of him. And he's certainly exciting. That's for sure. There's no doubt he is very fast. He blitzed the Met Mile, beating what was a pretty solid field at the time. So he is definitely going to have the eyes of the racing world upon him.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll be somewhat surprised if they do keep him around at 5, assuming he wins these next two races. I guess we'll see how that plays out. He already is a very valuable stallion prospect, so we'll see about that. But we're going to talk about Flightline in greater depth a little bit later in this podcast. We are going to go through the entire late pick 5 sequence at Del Mar, races 7 through 11. 4 of those are graded stakes events, 3 of them on the turf. We've got the grade 2 Del Mar Mile kicking things off, the Del Mar Derby for the 3-year-olds, and closing things out in the final race with the Del Mar Handicap going 1 mile and 3/8 for the marathoners on the turf. There is a dirt allowance race also in the sequence to make things a bit more interesting. So Craig, let's dive right into it and talk about this first graded stakes event as part of this pick 5, the Del Mar Mile, going 1 mile on the turf course. We have a pretty competitive field of 10 signed on for this one, though it does feel like the horse to beat is probably the number 5 Hong Kong Harry, who is coming out of a solid second place finish in the Eddie Reed last time.
I would agree. He did have some trouble at the start of that race last time, and I wonder if people are going to overstate that because the way the race was run, it was a really quick pace. So I'm not sure that pace didn't counteract. He's a horse who generally likes to be up pretty close, so I'm not going to weight that pretty heavily, but that doesn't mean he's not a contender in this race. I just wonder how much value he's going to offer. He's a horse who's hasn't run particularly fast races. His one big speed figure on TimeformUS came with a big pace adjustment boost back in his debut in March. And yeah, I'm kind of lukewarm on Hong Kong Harry and this whole race in general. It's a grade 2. I was really hoping we get a few quality shippers in here that I could lean on, but that didn't happen. So this one's a bit puzzling for me.
Yeah, it's a race that definitely has drawn better fields in the past. I think of runners like Smooth Like Straight, who you might have thought could run here, but I think he chose the Arlington Million instead. That horse that won it last year for Peter Miller, Mo something, whose name is escaping me now. I guess he didn't leave that much. Yeah, Mo Forza, who did. I mean, he would be an odds-on favorite if he showed up against a field like this. So it's not the strongest grade 2 that we've ever seen. I agree, Hong Kong Harry makes sense. I don't view him as necessarily that formidable in here. I actually think the horse that finished right behind him last time in the Eddie Reed, Calf Can Peak, is equally interesting. both of these horses are cutting back from the mile on an eighth to the mile. I think it might actually suit Kafkin Peak a little better. He's a horse that did run really well going the flat mile when he first came to this country. They stretched him out after that, and just seemed like maybe he lost a little bit of the late kick that he possessed when we initially saw from him. The waters have gotten deeper since then, of course, because they've tried some graded stakes events, but I think he's a little bit interesting cutting back, and Umberto Rispoli has been riding this turf course very well. So I think he's a major player. There are some other great places you could go, some horses stepping up in class, and Craig, we probably should talk about the pace situation because we do have a horse in here, the number 6 Goliad, who looks pretty quick, and you'd imagine will try to be using the same tactics that we saw from him to win an allowance race last time.
He's one I'm interested in because he was loose last time and he was loose in not slow time either. He had some pretty solid pace figures. He was really able to open up on the turn and hold sway throughout. And if he gets loose again, he's going to be dangerous. Juan Hernandez is riding him. He's been red hot at Del Mar, riding the turf well. So he's definitely going to be on my tickets. A couple others you mentioned that are stepping up in class. One will be Iridio, who won last time at a big price. And matter of fact, he narrowly missed the time before at an even huger price, or more huge, I should say. But he's a horse who has shipped in from South America. He was racing in Argentina, and he came here. He didn't run at all in his first two starts, but he's really took off the last two, and that's not really surprising for a South American shipper. They generally take some time to get going, so he's one that's going to be on my tickets. I'm not sure he's going to be 5-1 either after being those two huge prices last time. I think he might offer a little more value than that. And the one other horse I'm going to take a look at a really big price, and it's just what I alluded to in the beginning. Somebody new to come in here and maybe do some running is the horse from Chile, the 8 horse Figueretti. As a figure guy, I guess I have to pick him a little bit, but he's only run once in this country at Gulfstream on the synthetic. His speed figure doesn't really match up. He wasn't in great form in Chile, but he just seems like a total wild card to me in a division that's not very strong. So I would use him as like a seahorse in here.
Yeah, I mean, I get where you're coming from. It's a race where I found it tough to have a very strong opinion. I was not as afraid of Goliad wiring the field. I thought that he was facing the right kind of group last time. I know we got a big speed figure for that race. It's the kind of fast-paced turf speed figure that I want to see validated when a horse comes back. Sometimes those numbers can get a little bit inflated, and I just want to see him do it against a tougher field. So I wasn't so interested in him. I already mentioned Kafkin Peak. Another horse that I think is a little bit interesting that we haven't mentioned yet is the number 9 Tripoli. He obviously is last year's winner of the Pacific Classic. I get why they're not trying that race this year. It's come up a much tougher spot. But I thought his turf race off the layoff of the American two-back was not nearly as bad as that fourth place finish would indicate. He was in traffic for much of the way, didn't get as good a ride or trip as Hong Kong Carry, who won that race. He's going to have to step forward because he just hasn't quite looked like himself since he was in great form in that Pacific Classic last year. But it's not like off that American performance, he's that far off some others in here, and he's probably going to be a square price. So I would use him along with those two shorter prices that I mentioned. Like you, I wasn't exactly sure what to do with Irideo, that Argentinian horse who won the big price in the Wicker last time. I actually think that Wicker Stakes was of comparable quality to this grade 2, even though that was a restricted event. My problem is, when he was 31-1, he got an absolutely perfect ride and trip from Hector Barrios, and I question whether he can kind of conjure up that same magic once again, 2 starts in a row, but we'll see. It's not going to take a huge effort to beat this field.
Yeah, I wanted to make a case for Tripoli. My one issue with him is I really think he's a better dirt horse. He made that big jump last year when he moved to the dirt. He won an allowance race, ran well in the San Diego, won the Pacific Classic before kind of dropping off and disappearing. He didn't run very well in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Maybe he's okay on turf. I just still think he's a better dirt horse, so I'm going to go in a different direction.
Let's move on to the non-stakes portion of this sequence. Race 8, it is an optional claimer, 40,000 non-winners of one other than the allowance condition. And Craig, this one looks fairly wide open. We do have a couple horses that I guess are going to take some money coming off good efforts at this level. One of those is Redline, who was second earlier in the Del Mar meet. The other, Exalted, who was third in a similar spot, going 6.5 furlongs earlier in the meet. Exalted's the one who's coming out of the very fast race. I think we even talked about that one on the TimeformUS Pacecast a few weeks ago, won by the promising-looking Kid Corleone. And Exalted has also faced some tough horses in the past, just as a horse that they've had trouble keeping on the racetrack over the past few years.
He feels like the horse to beat to me. I think he's the fastest horse. He has the best accomplishments, but I mean, this is a non-winners of one, so nobody has a lot of accomplishments in here. My one concern with Exalted is the lack of pace in the field. On the pace projector, we have the blue favors early flag, Sunrise Journey shown on a clear early lead. Exalted is near the back of the pack, as he should be, because he doesn't have a lot of kick, but he would be the horse I'm going to lean on in here. I just think his edge is a little bit stronger. He'll be able to overcome that pace. So he would be an A for me. I'm not as high on Redline. His race came back kind of slow last time when he lost the City Rage. He's never really run a particularly quick race. I guess the one upside would be maybe he's moving in the right direction, but he's bounced back and forth between surfaces so much. In his prior barn, it was kind of hard to get a read on him, and now in his new barn, he's run on turf. Now maybe he'll stick to the dirt, but of the two, I would prefer Exalted. As for that lone leader, Sunshine Journey, who, I mean, it seems like he'd almost have to fall down out of the gate not to make the early lead. He's normally the horse that I would want to bet, but he's not really for me in here. Maybe I would use him as a backup if I thought his price was going to be better, like if he was going to be double digits, but I don't think that's going to happen. He doesn't feel like the kind of horse at 7 furlongs is going to do any favors. To me, he's the only horse in the field in for a tag, and it seems like last time was the time to have him. Trainer Steve Knapp does well with horses first off the claim, not so well second off the claim, so he's actually one I'll probably fade a bit in here.
Yeah, we had a similar view on that likely leader who is shown as having an advantage on the Timeform US pace projector. I agree. If he ran his last speed figure, Sunrise Journey, I should say, he'd be a player in here, and that speed figure, it makes him pretty tough. But the 7 furlongs, the fact that was earned against a weaker field, I also have some reservations. Craig, when I was first going through this race, I kind of was of the same opinion as you that Exalted was probably the shorter price that you wanted. But as I kind of dug a little deeper, I kept coming back to Redline because he is just a 3-year-old. And he actually ran some decent speed figures fairly early in the year. And I think it's probably expected that he's improved recently over the summer. Some of it might be due to the fact that he was claimed by Sharp Connections, John Sadler and Ronus Racing. But it just seemed like maybe he's a horse that's blossoming now in the summer of his 3-year-old year, which is pretty normal to see. And when I went back and watched his last race, this rider switch might be pretty significant because the 7-pound apprentice that was on last time literally kept this horse in the 5 path for the entirety of the far turn. It's tough to lose that much ground and be successful, and now he's getting an upgrade to John Velasquez. I just think there might be some intention with this horse. But the concern, though, is he's another that doesn't have that much tactical speed, and when I look at that pace projector, it's kind of hard to envision too many of these horses working out the right kind of trip that they need. So I would hope that a professional like Johnny V is a little bit more aggressive with this one because he has shown some tactical speed in the past. So I would tentatively make Redline a top pick in this race, but there are other places to go. I mean, what do you do with the outside horse, the number 10 disc jockey, who is going first off the claim for Peter Miller? This is a horse that early in his career showed kind of surprising improvement for Safi Joseph, then was dipped out in some cheaper races. I mean, he's got the back figures to factor. He's just kind of an odd horse to trust.
Yeah, I think you probably want to use Peter Miller first off the claim. He certainly has good stats, as I'm sure most of our listeners know, and not one I want to get knocked out of a pick 5 if he wins. So I would have him in here as well. The only other horse I wanted to mention, because I'm just really torn on him, is the 4 horse Conundrum. And no, I'm just kidding. That was a really bad joke.
The one thing I will say about this pace projector, Craig, is it does not show the position of the number 8 Toto Fino, who is kind of a wild card in this race. We don't know a whole lot about him, but if you just kind of glance through his form from Chile, it appears that he has a lot of speed. He's running a lot of 5 furlong events. Typically, those are one on the front end. I don't know what kind of running style this horse has. I haven't watched any of his races, but you would kind of assume just from looking at his form that he's one that might have speed. Not that I'm saying I like him in here or that 7 furlongs is the right distance for him, but I wouldn't be surprised if he has some effect on the pace.
Yeah, I looked for a couple of his races and I wasn't able to find them. They're not exactly the highest quality. Maybe if I'd have spent more time and I could have found them. But as you said, the PPs kind of look like he's a speed horse. He's been running a lot of 5s and 6s. So it is possible he could have an effect on the pace. And that would certainly be of help to horses like Redline and Exalted for sure. So kind of a wide, I guess you could say a wide open race, but a race I'm not going to get too crazy. I'll use those two, the 5 red line, the 9 exalted a little bit more, and that's probably about it for me. Oh, and the 10. Apologies, yeah, and the 10.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, we agree on him. He's a horse that I would not want to get knocked out by that first off the claim for Peter Miller. Let's move on to race 9, the Grade 2 Del Mar Derby. This one for the 3-year-olds going 1.125 miles on the turf course. And another pretty wide open turf race, Craig. I guess the horses to beat would be McKinnon and Balnikov, particularly the outside drawn runner, Balnikov, who's coming off that victory last time out in the Oceanside. I think we had talked about that race on the Pacecast. He just got a fantastic ride and trip from Umberto Rispoli that day, who looked like he was making all the right moves at the start of the Del Mar meet. Are you at all concerned about the stretch back out to 1.125 miles for this horse? Because it does seem like he's really done his best running going the mile.
Yeah, he flattened out going 1.125 miles, two starts back, and I am concerned. I think, as you said, we talked about the trip he had last time, the perfect ride that he was given by Rispoli. It was a very good pace setup. The pace was really hot that day, so I think he can win. But he's not a horse I'm just itching to bet in here. I think he's probably going to get overbet. Of the 2 horses you mentioned that are probably going to vie for favoritism, I'd probably prefer McKinnon a little bit. He was one that, for some reason, got put on the Derby trail after a successful juvenile career. Actually, ran third in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. Um, didn't work out so well. He even tried the race at the El Camino Real at Golden Gate, where he ran okay, but then we didn't see him for a while. And he showed up last time in a race with that same race as Balnikov, really fast pace in there. But I just get the feeling he's one that might appreciate the distance a little more. I don't think he was fully cranked for that listed stakes. It feels like this is one that would be more up his alley. So of the 2 favorites, I prefer him, but I don't love him either. It's not like he's ever run a particularly fast race. So I'm going to look at some of the horses to the inside. The one I want to talk about is Cabo Spirit. He won the La Jolla last time with a 111 speed figure, which is the best speed figure last out in the field. Draws a good post, and I would actually prefer him to both the favorites. But that said, he's not even my top pick. That would be the 3 horse War at Sea, who has just run really well both times on the last 2 times on the turf routing. For whatever reason, Mike Smith seems to have found the key with him. He always seems to get the job done. He ran a good speed figure last time, a 108. He did it tracking what was a quick pace, and he beat the horse I just mentioned, Cabo Spirit, who wasn't able to reel him down despite that quick pace. And we haven't seen him since June, so I would say that 108 speed figure is probably about the equivalent of what we saw from Cabo Spirit. And I just feel like he's really dangerous in this spot, in good form, and one that I'm going to bet vertically as well. The other horse I wanted to mention and ask you about was the 2 horse Slowdown Andy. We show him on a clear lead in the pace projector. He's obviously had good dirt form. He won the Los Alpha Futurity. He's run some nice speed figures. I do wonder if he likes Los Al more than some of the other tracks, as that's where his best figures have come. but he's run decently other places, and I just wonder if he's going to handle turf. So I that's my question for you.
Yeah, we have a similar take on this race. Although I was maybe a little more negative on both favorites. Balnikov, I just don't like the stretch out that much. McKinnon, he did run well in the Breeders' Cup last year. I have some questions about how strong that Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf really was. I think we've seen more horses disappoint out of that race than improve, and his form this year is just okay. I think he needs to take a step forward here. So kind of like you, Craig, I was looking towards the inside at the 1, 2, and 3, and we have the same notes on Cabo Spirit. I think he's dangerous in this race. The distance is no problem for him. He doesn't have kind of that sexy look of some others in here, but I just think he makes a lot of sense. And the number 3 War at Sea. The one reservation I have is I was reading the DRF article about this race, and he did miss a planned start between June 4th and now. They did not intend to have a 3-month layoff coming into this race. I think he had a minor foot bruise, and that forced him to miss a week or two of training, which just kind of threw off their schedule a little bit. So if he's ready coming in off works, I think he's a major player because everything else you said, I agree with. I like his progression coming in here. It doesn't feel like the distance is any problem. He's got some tactical speed, so I'm not that concerned about the pace. So I think War at Sea is a major player. And as for that first-time turfer, the number 2, Slow Down Andy, I think he's pretty dangerous in here. There's not a ton of speed in this race. You'd imagine that with Doug O'Neill also trading McKinnon, a closer, this one is going to go to the front end, and that could give him his best chance to potentially wire the field. As far as turf goes, he does have pedigree for it. Nyquist has been a decent turf influence. Got Square Eddie on the dam side, and actually this dam has produced a full brother to this guy named Team Merchants, who was seemingly equally proficient on both dirt and turf, actually won a stakes on the turf. So Slow Down Andy seems like one that can handle it, and he's got what I perceive to be the physicality and stride to take to the turf. He's a horse that can be a little bit green at times. Sometimes he's his own worst enemy, although it seems like those bad habits have come more in those Los Alamitos races than anywhere else. Maybe he just doesn't like the configuration of that track, even though he's run some of his best races there. He's very green in his races there. But I think he's going to handle the turf, and he's one that I definitely want to use in this race.
Well, good info. That's what I wanted to hear because I'm always a sucker for horses that I think are going to get an easy lead, and we'll talk about that in the last race as well when we get to it. So, yeah, it's one. I'm not sure. I guess we'll talk about ticket construction as we get there, but I'm definitely more interested in the inside 3 than I am the 2 favorites. One horse we didn't mention that on the morning line is pegged at only 4-1 is Dandy Warhol. And personally, I just don't see it. I suspect it's probably not a great morning line. He was a horse who won his first level allowance with a great trip, didn't have much of a speed figure. So I just didn't want to completely ignore him.
Yeah, I would guess that morning line has a lot to do with the presence of Flavien Prat. And we should not forget, it wasn't that long ago that Flavien Prat was riding regularly out in California, and all of his mounts would take a ton of money. So maybe it's not wrong, but I agree with you. Even though I'm a big fan of Prat as a rider, I don't love the stretch out for a son of Dandy Man, and he took advantage of a pace collapse last time. So wasn't the biggest fan of that one. Let's move on to race 10. And Craig, you mentioned ticket construction, and this is probably a good place to start talking about it because this is a race where you have to make some decisions. You've got Flightline, who is 1-5 on the morning line. No one's going to be surprised when he goes off at 1-9 here or lower than that because he just is a horse that has such a following. People believe he's so brilliant. He's got these towering speed figures, though this is a race that does feature a few horses with some pretty high speed figures. Actually, as I go through it, I count 5 out of 6 runners that have earned TimeformUS speed figures of 130 plus at some point in their careers, and that's a rare thing. Probably only the Breeders' Cup Classic usually attracts quality like that, so it's not like Flightline is meeting a field of bad horses. He's going to have to run and handle a mile and a quarter. I think most people trust him to do it, but how short a price do you want to take on a horse that has so many questions to answer?
Well, as the ticket construction, I'll say this. The way I play these, you either, in my opinion, you have to single Flightline or you don't use Flightline. There really shouldn't be a different alternative because he's going to be that heavy a favorite. He's going to be 1-9. Uh, Personally, I'll probably look like a fool after the race, but I'm not going to use Flightline. It's just something over the long time I've been following this game. I've seen a lot of horses like him come and go. And the thing to my eye is he looks more like a horse who's a miler to me when he runs than a horse that wants a mile and a quarter. I know he's been working out great, but I just don't want 1 to 9 on a horse who is trying 2 turns for the first time, stretching out 2 furlongs further than he's ever run for the first time. And it's only his second start of the year in September. So if Lightline beats me, I can live with it. I can turn the page, but I'm going to go a different direction. We'll get to that. I want to hear how you feel about Flightline.
No, I agree with your assessment how you have to approach this from a wagering standpoint. And I think the big question with Flightline is, yes, he looks like the lone speed in this race. That's shown on the pace projector. He's just naturally faster than these horses, but I'm not sure that I would expect him to have too much of a pace advantage in this race, Craig, because when I watch him run, I have doubts that he's the kind of horse that can go 47 to the half, which I think people would want to see. I mean, he's just so naturally fast. I don't know if they can slow him down enough to set a slow to moderate pace. And it's tough to run hard every step of the way going a mile and a quarter. I don't deny that his pedigree is geared towards going longer distances. He's by Tappet. There's plenty of stamina on the bottom side, but just his temperament and physicality, it says to me that he's just an aggressive horse that wants to run fast every step of the way. And I worry more about how hard he's going to be on himself going this distance. So, I mean, if he even takes a step backwards of 5 to 10 speed figure points, I mean, he does not have this race in the bag. There are some good horses that will be ready to step up to the plate and beat him. And I mean, from a value standpoint, I don't think that 1 to 5 or certainly not 1 to 9 is good value on Flightline. So I agree with you. Going into this sequence, he's just a horse that I'm going to completely pitch and try to go for the much bigger payout using alternatives.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we were kind of saying the same thing. We just said it a little differently. And when I said I think he runs more like a miler, and it's hard for me to see him take into rating. And similar to Life is Good, I know a lot of people still have questions about him going a mile and a quarter. They're kind of the same. They're just so naturally fast. It just seems like those longer distances are going to get tougher. So if he's pressured early, which I don't think he'll be super pressured early, but I also don't think he's going to be 5 on top. There's some pretty good horses in the field. So as you pointed out, there's some horses who have run really fast. I'll just jump right to the horse that I'm going to go with. He will probably be a single. Maybe I'll use a C or two. Just depends how the ticket comes out. But I really like Country Grammar in this spot. I thought he ran very well in the desert, obviously, running second in the Saudi race, winning the Dubai World Cup, beating Hot Rod Charlie, among others. And just, he's a horse who I know wants the 10 furlongs. He's run well at it before, he's run big speed figures. And I think the San Diego last time, where he was beaten by Royal Ship, was just a race he definitely wasn't fully cranked for. Is a race that's a furlong and a half too short for him, and I think this is the day. And I think he's sitting on a big win, and he'll be my live or die horse on this day.
Yeah, I agree that Country Grammar is the most likely upsetter if there is an upset in this race, just for all the reasons you mentioned. He handles the distance. I thought his return last time in the San Diego was okay. He came off the bridle very early that day, had to be hard ridden to even get second, but he was finishing at the end like a horse that's probably going to do better over longer distances, which he's proven in the past. I'll admit I have not liked the visual of his workouts coming into this race. He's been really hard ridden in the morning to stay in contact with inferior workmates. But I do get the sense that he's just not a good workhorse. I mean, I watched some of his works even coming into the San Diego, and they looked the same. So I don't want to get too caught up in that, even though I usually do put stock in that for Bob Baffert trainees. They kind of tout how they're doing in their workouts, and this ones are negative, but that might just be this horse. I think he makes a lot of sense. I'd go a little bit towards the bigger price, though, with the number 3 Royal Ship. Just from a value standpoint, I feel like he's probably going to be, as the morning line suggests, maybe twice the price. And I'm not convinced this horse can't get a mile and a quarter, Craig. He ran a big race against Country Grammar in that Gold Cup last year. That was one of the fastest races of 2021. And I know he disappointed in the Pacific Classic after that. He was off for a long time after that race, so perhaps something went wrong. He just never looked like himself that day. And I know Royal Ship took no money until the very late stages in that San Diego last time, but he looked really good winning that race. I mean, he traveled well every step of the way, was just much the best on that occasion, and he's coming into this race looking like he's pretty dangerous and fresh. So I like Royal Ship in this spot. He might be better going a mile and an eighth than a mile and a quarter, but I'm not going to worry too much about that at the price. But given that my primary opinion is a negative one on Flightline, or at least the stance that he's offering negative value, I don't want to get too caught up just, singling one horse or going too much towards one horse that I don't feel that strongly about. So I do want to use Country Grammar and Royal Ship in similar strength. And I even want to use a little bit of Express Train because he has some speed figures that suggest that if the race comes apart a little bit, he'll be right there to pick up the pieces. He's a reliable horse who typically runs well in these races, has run some big efforts at Del Mar in the past. So he's another one that I would want to have on my ticket. So no Flightline for me. I'll use some Country Grammar, especially Royal Ship, and even a little bit of Express Train as a backup, just hoping to get through this leg beating the favorite.
Those are the two others I would use if I find my ticket structure allows it. I don't want to get crazy spending a ton of money trying to beat Flightline, but those would definitely be my backups. The one horse that I've liked for a while is Stiletto Boy, a horse who was running at Thistledown at one time, if memory serves. But he's kind of run all over and is Stiletto Boy. But I've just kind of come off of him. He never ever seems to get the job done. He did in the Californian when he was able to beat Express Train, but that seems more like the fluke than the rest of his running line. So as much as I wanted to play him at a huge price, I just went away from him. Especially when you consider his one big race came when he was on the lead, and I just don't see any way he's getting there on this day.
Yeah, and Craig, just to wrap up our discussion on Flightline, you brought up Life is Good earlier, and I think that's a perfect comparison because, especially after Life is Good won that Pegasus earlier in the year, when these horses keep winning and passing the tests, they kind of gain this air of invincibility, and their legions of fans believe that nothing can possibly beat them. And you might remember Life is Good was a huge favorite in the U.S. pools for the mile and a quarter Dubai World Cup, and lo and behold, he's just not a mile and a quarter horse, or at least he wasn't that day. The distance beat him. Life is Good himself beat him by going too fast on the front end. And, these things happen. And, Flightline has looked so impressive that I just feel like I've been monitoring the conversation on social media and in the regular media. It's like people just assume that he's going to pass this test with flying colors because he's looked so impressive in his one-turn races. And I think that's folly. 1 to 5 is not good value on a horse that has to answer this big of a question. And I know we both agree there. I'm preaching to the choir, but I just, I want to hammer that point home because it might sound weird to people that we're both tossing Flightline completely from our tickets, but you do have to make a value assessment. And I think with the types of races we watched over the year, that's over time proven to be the right call in these races.
Right. There's one thing when growing up, I've read every single book I could ever get my hands on in horse racing. Most of it has been tossed down the drain a long time ago, but there's a few things that have stuck with me for a very long time. And one of them, it was James Quinn, was a guy who just wrote a ton of books, and he always harped on the fact that a mile and a quarter is just different. And it's something that I followed for a long time, and it's proven to be true. Just because horses do well at shorter distances, even a mile and an eighth, it's just a whole different ball game when you get to a mile and a quarter. If Flightline does it, I'll probably look to beat him again when he faces off, especially having to face off against Life is Good in a race like the Classic, I would assume. But if he doesn't, who knows what's going to happen. But I have to take a chance against a horse I think is going to be way overbet.
Well, Craig, let's move late into Saturday night, at least for me on the East Coast. We're moving on to race 11, the Del Mar Handicap, and we've successfully navigated the first 3 legs. Let's say we beat Flightline in the Pacific Classic. How are we getting through this Del Mar Handicap to close things out?
Well, I would have said you say late on the East Coast. It'll be late here too because I'm a lot older than you. So we'll do that time form US adjustment, and we're basically getting the same figure once the pace adjustment is made. But no, the this is a pretty tough race. I think it's one where I think you could go in a lot of different directions. Again, I'm not going to get too crazy on my ticket. I didn't even know who to start with. I guess I would start with the morning line favorite Masterpiece, a horse I know you're familiar with from his brief stint on the East Coast. He's since been shipped out west, and he had a real breakthrough last time in the Eddie Reed when he was able to get up, win that Grade Two, and while he did get a very good trip that day, all the fractions were in red. He was well back. I don't want to underestimate just how well he ran because he blew that field away. How did you? What do you think of his?
Yeah, that Eddie Reed did come apart a little bit, and he got the right pace setup that day, as I believe those red color coded Timeform US pace figures would indicate to you. But he was still visually impressive. I mean, anytime you win a turf race like that, especially at Del Mar by 3+ lengths, you're dominating your competition. And the distance is not supposed to be a problem for him. He's gone this far in the past. I think he was actually second in this exact race last year, which was a very roughly run race if you go back and watch it. And I think he's one of the ones that had to navigate some traffic, though others had much worse trips than he did. But that said, I'm not sure that he's improved that much for the Michael McCarthy barn. It just feels like he's facing somewhat weaker competition on the West Coast than he was on the East Coast. And based on his recent races, he just makes a lot of sense in here.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Chad Brown started him at a mile and a half in his first start in the country. So even though it didn't really work out in the Chad Brown barn for him so much as shipping west to face what I would say is weaker competition, he kind of tipped his hand in that's what he wants to run. So I don't want to dismiss Masterpiece. I also like the horse to his outside a bit, Master of Foxhounds. He's a horse who is one of the few who just consistently runs 120 speed figures. And I wonder if this distance won't be better for him going a mile and 3/8. He's a horse who likes to run on the front end. His best races have come when he's up there, but the pace just gets a little hot when he runs these shorter races. Now, he didn't run that very well in this race last year, but he also had some traffic problems, and he's shown clear on the pace projector. So he's one I'm interested in that could get out there. I think he is a horse who could slow the pace down to a reasonable one and really finish off. And I just don't ever want to dismiss a Phil D'Amato horse in these races. I know there's more than one, as there always are. There's several more than one in here, but I think he's particularly dangerous with the early speed and the speed figures he comes in with.
Yeah, I agree. He's a horse that I definitely want to use as well. Wrong pace setup last time. He's gone longer in the past successfully, so I think Master of Foxhounds makes a lot of sense. Craig, what do you do with the horse that's all the way on the outside, Haywood's Beach, who has achieved his best results recently on the dirt, but he's handled turf before, and he's shown in some recent dirt starts that distance is no problem, so is going long on the turf going to work for him now?
I'm not sure. He's one I was lukewarm on. I could definitely see the case being made for him. We gave him a 122 speed figure in the Shoemaker, which stacks up pretty nicely in here. But he's one I do wonder if he is just better on dirt. Um, he's a really tough call for me. I don't like the post position, so he's one I probably won't use in here. But I wouldn't have an argument against anybody that really likes him. A couple others I did want to mention. Gold Phoenix is yet another of those Phil D'Amato horses who didn't run particularly great last time, but I think he's one that's going to appreciate the distance. He's run 120 speed figures before. His best race came at a mile and a quarter. He hasn't had a chance to go this far yet. He gets a good inside draw. So he's one I'd want to use. He gets Flavian Prat, so that's probably not going to help at the windows, as you mentioned earlier. He will likely be getting bet. But then I do want to use a big price horse in here, and that's a five Tango Tango Tango. He's another horse who's just been running 120 type speed figures. He's 20 to 1 on the morning line. He's only tried to go this far one time at Belmont in the Belmont Derby, which seems like a long time ago, but it was only over a year ago. But I'm not going to write him off just based on that race. Yabir was in that race. He set a fast pace. And at a huge price, I'm willing to give him another chance on my pick five ticket.
Yeah, we have a very similar view here, Craig. It's tough because the two horses that drew the best post positions, the 2 and 3, Gold Phoenix and Gregdar, who, in my opinion, from a form standpoint, are a cut below the outside drawn runners we just talked about. They've got the best jockeys on board in Flavian Pratt and Umberto Rispoli, and they've drawn the better post position. So it's a little scary to throw those horses out, even though I don't really like them. But those good jockeys are also going to kind of ensure that they get bet down a little bit. So I feel like that's kind of the direction I have to go, away from them a little bit. We pegged the same long shot that's interesting, the 5 Tango Tango Tango. I agree with everything you said. I'm not going to knock his form too much because he was another one that was chasing that strong pace in the Eddie Reed last time and kind of made what looked like it might be a winning move to challenge at the top of the stretch before things just really fell apart in the final eighth of a mile. And he ran well last time behind Set Peeps, who was a good horse on the East Coast and in Kentucky. Like you said, distance is a question, but I'm not going to worry too much about that at the expected price. So he's definitely one that I would want to use as well.
Yeah, and as to those horses drawn inside, I mentioned Gold Phoenix. I would use him. I've never been a fan of Greg Dar. I think he's just not good enough to win a race like this, and he's going to take the money because of Umberto Rispoli. So he's one I would definitely be not using in here.
Well, Craig, let's wrap things up and we talked about ticket structure a little bit with regard to that Pacific Classic. Let's kind of go through it again because it's not the easiest sequence to put a ticket together for, even if you're not using Flightline. The surrounding races are not the easiest to navigate.
Yeah, for sure. The Del Mar Mile is tough. I would definitely be using a few horses in there. Goliad was one. Cathkin Peak is another. Irideo is one I would use. And then even the long shot Figueretti and Hong Kong Harry, I don't want to totally dismiss him. I wouldn't want to get knocked out in the first leg because it wouldn't surprise me at all if he won this race. I think he's probably one of the top two percentage chances to win. So I would spread in that race. In the eighth race, I'm going to use Exalted, and I'm going to use your horse, whose name I'm forgetting right now. It starts with the red.
Red line.
Red line, yes, and not go too deep on in that race. I think those are the best two. I'd use Exalted like an A, Red line as a B, but you kind of swayed me with your argument. I knew he was wide. I didn't realize he was as wide as you said, and the rider switch is big. In the Del Mar Derby, not a big fan of the favorites, Balnikov and McKinnon. Like I said, I prefer McKinnon of those two. Uh, Probably won't use either one of them. I'm going to use the three inside horses: Cabo Spirit, War at Sea, Slow Down Andy. If I had to make a top pick, it would probably be War at Sea, but I'd be happy with any of those three winning. We talked about the Pacific Classic quite a lot. I'm going to lean on Country Grammar, but I have no problem with using Royal Ship or once again, I'm forgetting the other Mandela horse.
Express Train.
Yes, Express Train, not Extra Hope. Don't want to confuse those two. Express Train has run pretty fast, so if I can afford it, I would add those two on my tickets. And then in the last, I'll go probably four deep with Masterpiece, Master of Foxhounds, Tango Tango Tango, and Gold Phoenix.
Yeah, Craig and I don't differ too much in this sequence. I would start things off using the logical Hong Kong Harry, though preferring Cathkin Peak in the Del Mar Mile a little bit. I'd also want to have some money going through Tripoli. Just think that his trip two back makes him a little bit interesting here. I do like Redline in that allowance race up next. I might lean on him a little bit using some backups like Exalted, the Miller off the claim, disc jockey. Depending on price, I would take a look at Mr. Impossible or Sunrise Journey down towards the rail, but I get that things start to get bloated when you add too many of these horses in the sequence and you're not singling in the Pacific Classic. In the Del Mar Derby, like Craig, I like those three inside runners, Cabo Spirit, Slow Down Andy, and War at Sea. Probably not pressing any of them too much, but just trying to get through this race with those three. In the Pacific Classic, like I said, Royal Ship would be my top pick, but I do respect Country Grammar. I'd use both of them, having most of my play go through those two. Express Train would be a backup, but on a lower tier than those top two. And like Craig, no Flightline for me in the Pacific Classic. And then Craig and I are in agreement in the last leg. I feel like we have the same horses. I'd probably throw in the number 11, Haywood's Beach. I'm maybe a little more positive on him than Craig is. I think that the distance could really work for him, but obviously it's not a great post, so you'd hope for a decent price on that one. But not the easiest sequence to navigate, Craig, but I don't feel bad about going a little bit bloated in a few of these legs, because if you do beat Flightline, the one thing I'm certain of is this is really going to pay.
For sure, because I imagine he's probably going to be a single on at least 90% of the tickets out there. It's going to be a fun day as a fan. There's a lot of good races, but I think all eyes are going to come on the Pacific Classic. It isn't very often we get to see a horse like Flightline, and especially to try something this new with those kind of speed figures. We don't see horses in their four-start jump from a one-turn mile to a two-turn mile and a quarter in grade one company. So it's going to be interesting. It's fascinating from a betting perspective, but I also think it's fascinating just as a fan, and it's going to have future repercussions. As I would imagine, we're not going to see a lot of these horses we see Saturday until the Breeders' Cup, and certainly only one more time at most if we do. So just a good day for trip note making. It'll be a fun day for speed figure making, and we haven't mentioned it, but there's plenty good racing at Saratoga and also Kentucky Downs as well. So just a really cramped and fun for the horse player Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, Craig said it well. I've done a lot of work on the Saratoga card as well. You can find my thoughts about that at the usual places. I don't have to recite all of them, but yeah, some good 2-year-old racing there that I'm very much looking forward to. But Craig is right. All eyes will be trained on Del Mar late on Saturday evening to see how Flightline does. And even though Craig and I picked against him, we're both fans of horses like Flightline, those that are just brilliantly fast. So even if we go out losers in this wager, I don't think either of us are going to be too disappointed if Flightline comes through with another huge effort, because we haven't seen too many like this one, Craig, that are as lightly raced, and if he passes this mile and a quarter test, that would be so equally brilliant at 6 furlongs and a mile and a quarter. It's a real rarity in horse racing, so I think it's a big hurdle to jump through, but boy, Flightline looks like a pretty special horse.
Yeah, if he does it, then I think you can start comparing him to a horse almost like Seattle Slew, even though he obviously doesn't have the accomplishments, but just the range of distances. And I'm with you. If I lose, I lose. I've been doing this game a long time. I can kind of take it and with a grain of salt. I know that you're going to lose a lot more often than you win, and I will be just as excited if Flightline wins by 5 or 10 lengths and runs a 140 speed figure, or almost as excited if I would be if I hit the pick five and hit a big ticket.
It's certainly a different kind of excitement, we'll put it that way. But yeah, we're both looking forward to the Pacific Classic on Saturday, as I assume you are. So everybody, thanks for listening to this podcast. Hopefully we gave out some opinions you can use to play Del Mar on Saturday. Remember that you can always catch these podcasts on DRF.com, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Just make sure to subscribe to the Daily Racing Form channel. Again, thanks for tuning in this week, and Craig and I will be back to recap these races on the TimeformUS Pacecast.